This is So Life Wants You Dead, a show that explores the intersection of illness, disability, healing, and creativity. 7 years ago, I was told I would need an emergency organ transplant. Before they put me under, I closed my eyes and imagined myself writing. Now, all these years later, I can say that was honestly what saved me. Well, that and a brand new liver. I'm Nora Logan, and this is a podcast on how looking at death helps you live. Today, my guest is Ronaé Fagon. Ronaé is a sustainability thought leader, illustrator, fashion designer, and co-founder of the sustainable e-commerce platform Slowco. She also lives with a mystery chronic illness for which she's yet to receive a diagnosis. As you'll hear in the episode, we're also friends, which made this episode particularly fun to record. Today we talk about Ronaé's illness, how grinding at a demanding job contributed to burning out in 2018, and what it's like to navigate the medical system when you don't have a diagnosis. Since I myself had a mystery illness that resulted in liver failure, I wanted to have a conversation about what it's like to live with a mystery condition and the gray area and grief that exists within that. Thanks for being here. Here's the conversation. Welcome to So Life Wants You Dead, Ronaé. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So you've been dealing with a mysterious autoimmune condition since 2017. Can you tell me a bit about how you first got sick?
Yeah, 2017, it was the summer, and it just started really small. I kind of woke up one morning before work and had what looked like a botched filler job on my lips, on the top lip. And that was the first time I kind of had any sort of inflammation on my body. And it obviously felt really foreign, but it wasn't concerning, and it kind of went down. After a few hours, that was the very first instance that I'd had it, and I kind of just assumed that maybe I'd been bitten by a mosquito in the night or something. But slowly after that month, this kind of started to happen more regularly, and that's when I realised that there was something going on in my body.
I have a lot of identification with that because actually one of my first symptoms was inflamed eyes. I thought something had bitten me as well. And I just thought it was a spider and got kind of...
Oh my God, you thought you had a spider bite on your eye?
Yeah. And then my face was inflamed as well. Because I was in Bali where I got sick, I just thought, okay, spider bite. And then when I was vomiting, I just thought, okay,
spider bite,
Bali belly, you know, and it continued to be a mystery. Can you tell me a bit more about other presenting symptoms?
I mean, it's really similar. I guess that speaks to how we are conditioned to paying attention to our bodies and kind of rationalizing things away. Yeah, so that was the June 2017. And then I went away in the October to Morocco with a friend, and we had gotten a bus from Chefchaouen to Fez, and in that time I got really sick. I basically just caught a cold. Someone on the bus had a really bad cold. I got the cold and obviously had a terrible time in Fez. Too hot. And I was in bed, and I woke up again with my lip but this time much, much bigger. And it was always only the top lip. It was really strange. And I just figured again, I've got a cold. I just had a really long journey. I've been traveling. I'm in a different country. It's just, my body is just really tired. And then after that month, it was happening more frequently, but it shifted from inflammation and hives on my face, on my lips, to my arms and the backs of my legs. And it became a time where I would then start to wake up every single day with the entirety of the backs of my legs and my thighs just covered in these really hot, incredibly swollen hives. And it felt kind of like an insatiable itch and pain that I couldn't really describe. The progression from that one time in June, then once again in October, it rapidly shifted to this kind of uncontrollable thing where I didn't know if it was something that I was eating, whether it was a laundry detergent or a fabric or I had developed a new allergy to something, it looked like anaphylaxis on my face. So to the point where if I did get a flare-up on my face, it just felt very concerning because you only ever see that type of swelling on someone who's about to like have their airways closed and, you know, go into shock. Thankfully, that's never happened. But it took a while and I had to start trying to see a GP to get a diagnosis, which proved to be very difficult.
And you're still looking for a diagnosis now, right?
Yeah, I'm still looking for a diagnosis from a doctor that will kind of take time to really pay attention, to go through the timeline, the symptoms, and the things that are happening, you know, like in your life that correlate to what goes on in your body. It just hasn't happened. So I've kind of self-diagnosed multiple times.
Can you take us back pre-2017? What did your life look like and what sort of led you to, I don't want to say being sick, but what were you doing for work? What did your life look like?
Well, I guess what led me to being sick, that's a pretty accurate way of framing it. A bit chaotic, to be honest. I graduated in 2015. I did a fashion textile design degree, and I think if anyone has done that, you know how hard it is. That final year especially is, I don't know if anyone could have prepared me for the amount of work and the lack of sleep that you'd need to endure to survive that and to do well and to feel proud of yourself. Between 2015 and 2017, I was working luxury fashion. And I would say on and off because, again, if you know the industry well, it's really difficult to hold down a job if you are looking for a pay that will actually sustain your life in a way where you can buy food and pay rent and live in London. And a lot of the roles that I had been given were terminated like after 3 months once they hit that point where they had to start paying you a certain amount and suddenly the budget disappeared. So it was a lot of up and down with work, and that was quite stressful after just finishing a stressful degree and then going into the working world, having basically prepared myself for that since I was maybe 11 years old, to having to find other ways to make money on the side of doing the thing and not giving up on that quote unquote dream of the industry that I went to working as a designer, textile especially. And then so with all the other jobs on the side, I decided that this really wasn't sustainable and I would need to figure out a different way of living. And it was kind of a period of grieving this idea of what my life would look like, grieving all of the work that I'd put in. I mean, I started interning at 14, knowing that I would need that in my back pocket by the time I got to uni, and I would need to build on that by the time I graduated to get those roles. And it kind of felt like all of that was for nothing. So there was a lot of grief, and I started practicing yoga in 2013, just before I finished or started my final year, and got really deep into it when I graduated, when, you know, you don't have anything else to do because you're looking for a job.
Yeah.
And so I decided to go to Costa Rica for a couple months to train to be a yoga teacher. And so there was this big transition between fast-paced, intense, everyday, crazy hours, no sleep, high social life in the fashion industry to Costa Rica, living in the jungle, training under a very different lens of how to live your life, how to have a different perspective, a really ancient wisdom. And it allowed me to gain a lot of like peace, I guess, back. And I started to notice a lot more that different things that I wanted in a different way that I wanted to engage in the industry. And it was kind of like a recalibration. But before I'd got to Costa Rica, I was working in a cafe to make money and save it. Every single penny went towards that trip. And I was working, like Monday to Friday. And there was a person that came in every single day. And then on the last day before my shifts ended, before I was about to leave, she came and gave me her business card and was like, we're hiring for this new place. Let me know if you're interested. And I kind of wasn't thinking anything of it. I figured I might just stay in Costa Rica. I emailed and had an interview, and it was for a new hotel opening in London. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. This might be a different way of refocusing my life. Let's just see how it goes. Had the interview the day before I flew to Costa Rica, was out there January to March, and on my third week of being out there, I got the email saying that I got the job. So it became this thing of like, do I stay in this state where I've realized that there's a lot more that I can gain from this way of living, from being deep in the practices of this ancient wisdom, or do I come back to London and take this job in hospitality that is similar to fashion, but you know, it might be a bit different. And obviously, scarcity mindset. I was like, no, you need to be smart, make a sensible decision. So I came back and took the job, and it was just chaos, to be honest. Hotel openings are not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
It's not something that I would say that I would recommend to
Especially
anyone.
after restful yoga teacher training in Costa Rica.
The contrast was something that I could not have prepared myself for ever. You know, to this day, I've made some of the best friends I've ever, made in my life. I've learned so much from that role. It was meant to be at the time, but it was 3 months after that job that I started to get the symptoms of the flare-ups. And with the information that I have now, and especially the information that I had gained from being in Costa Rica, but didn't sink in until I guess a few years later, is that kind of dramatic shift can dramatically change the way that your body responds to stress, the way that your health is. And I think that's definitely what was the catalyst for this phantom illness.
You're working in fashion and then you go into hospitality, both of which have a reputation for really grinding.
I wish I knew that before I went into the hospitality world.
Me too. I wasn't in hospitality, but I was in fashion, and we have similar stories in that regard of just grinding, but also the working for free aspect of it, and the rude awakening that, oh, I'm going to work at this one designer, high-end designer for 5 months, hoping that it'll turn into something. But that's a whole nother podcast.
It literally never does.
It never does. It never does. And you have this dream and it's just crashed in front of you. But even with that you're still working towards something. You're still dreaming about something, and you shift direction. And I think for a lot of millennials, there's this concept of working themselves to the bone, working a full-time job and then having side hustles.
Yeah.
I've spoken about on other episodes how they used to be referred to as hobbies.
Yeah. They rapidly change from that.
Out of necessity, but also this obsession with working.
Yeah.
Did you feel the pressure of that then? And how do you deal with it now when your sort of awareness has so radically shifted, clearly?
I mean, I think it's a constant check-in with myself and being realistic about why I feel that way, or why I think that way, or why I'm addressing these skills in that way. Why do I keep trying to monetize everything that I can do? And how do I keep things joyful? And how do I keep things restful? I definitely resonate with that. Even at the time when I thought these internships or these placements were, you're praying this is going to lead to like a salaried job, you're kind of always thinking on the back burner, what's the fallback? What else can I do? What else can I show? Like, how do I like carve out a space for myself? Because this isn't going to be enough. It's kind of always been there. And I think now when I look at the trajectory of my career and all the things that I can do and the things that I make time for, I try not to put pressure on myself in the sense of, oh, I should be at this stage by now, or I should have done this, or these are the people that I should be in the same room as, because it's not linear. And I think for me to be in those places of the shoulds, I probably would be much sicker. I would have had to put in a lot more hours, sacrifice a lot more of my health in order to get there. And so it's just constant perspective, constantly running the timeline of why I am where I am today. And that's absolutely fine. And I'm very grateful because I am somewhat healthy and I'm alive and I'm able to really advocate for myself. That goes above any sort of success barometer that you might find on social media.
And in terms of finding a diagnosis and what your flare-ups look like now that you've shifted out of working in hospitality, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis?
It's really sporadic. I still don't have a grasp on how to, I don't want to say manage. I don't really have a grasp on when to expect a flare-up. And that is really frustrating. It's less common at certain stages. So we went into lockdown, obviously, every day, flare up. But 6 months prior to that, they'd really subdued and they'd really calmed down. I'd been seeing a friend of mine was a nutritionist, thank God, and she offered her services for me to help me figure out if it was a food thing. And that kind of helped manage it somewhat, but they would still pop up every now and then. But there was no way to really pinpoint what the causes were. So yeah, today it's still very much 1 week it's fine, another week it's not. It might completely wipe my energy and I can't do anything during and from some days afterwards. If it's cold season and I'm doing what I can to boost my immune system, but there is that kind of like suppressing energy around, I could get 1 flare up a month or 4, and I still don't really know how to deal with that.
Does it present in the same way as it did in 2017, or has it shifted?
It's at points can be more aggressive, to the point of waking up, my eyes are swollen, I can't open them. My cheeks are like red hot and kind of hard. And sometimes that can drift into the lips, which is where the kind of fear of what anaphylaxis looks like comes in. And I would say that that's more aggressive. In 2017, it was never like full face situation where I would need to be like in bed, just ice packs and trying all forms of anti-inflammatory remedies. And then sometimes it is just in isolated areas where if I can just leave them alone, like my legs or the backs of my arms, then I know that it'll go away. But like I said, the frustrating thing about it is that it's sporadic and there's no pattern to how and when it's going to show up. And there's no one remedy or one like, okay, I know if I do this, it's going to go away and it's going to take this many hours and I just need to do this, because every single time it's different.
Part of the reason I really wanted to speak to you is because I had a mystery diagnosis. And of course, it was very dramatic. It happened very quickly. My body shut down. But in the process of consulting doctors about what was happening in my body, I had a lot of bad advice. I went to one doctor and they were like, you have a stomach bug. Here's some antacids. Literally, if I had just taken the antacids for 10 days, I would not be here right now. I would be dead.
Yeah.
Of course, there's varying grades, I guess, of how dramatic conditions can present. But sometimes in dealing with the medical industry, it can be really frustrating in terms of finding a diagnosis. And
infuriating.
That's more accurate. For myself, I never received a diagnosis, and I've had to sort of do a lot of internal work and a lot of therapy around the frustration or the grief, really, that I feel around not having that diagnosis. But at this stage, it sort of bothers other people more than it bothers me. They really want to know, like, how they can not get it.
Yes, that is so common. It's not allergy.
No, exactly. It's not liver failure isn't catching. So what I'm curious to know from your side is, how has it been dealing with medical professionals? I know you mentioned that you have a nutritionist that you work with.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically medical professionals, how has it been trying to find a diagnosis and working with them?
Medical misogyny is real.
Yes.
It's rife. It's everywhere. It's been really, really fucking hard. It perplexing, to be honest with you. I think throughout the stress of it and the kind of being bewildered by responses that I've received, somehow I've managed to meet a lot of people who've experienced the similar dismissive energy and behavior from doctors who've had given me some really good advice. And so I went to my local GP, and I've been keeping like a photo diary of the flare-ups, just because obviously it's really difficult to get an appointment at GP. So there's no guarantee that when I go, I'm going to be experiencing a flare-up. Therefore, I can't show them exactly what's going on. So I've kept a photo journal of it for a really long time. And I went to see my local GP and had blood work done as per my nutritionist, and presented the results to him and was just like, look, there were no allergy markers. This is what's going on. I really need some further insight here. These are the photos. Most people that see the photos gasp because it's pretty fucking shocking. And he was like, well, I'm looking at your file, and from 2013, you had blood work done and you have a really high grass allergy. And I was like, yeah, I've had hay fever. I've had hay fever since I was a kid. Like, that's been the same throughout my life. And he was like, yeah, well, I just think that if you just take an antihistamine, this will just stop. And sometimes you can just open the window and that will be enough of a influx of pollen that could send you into a flare-up. So try not to do that. I was like, right, so stay inside, keep the windows closed, take one antihistamine, and that's it. And he was like, yeah, there's not much else that we can do here. We just want to, this is called an idiopathic urticaria. And I, having been living with this for quite a while, already knew what idiopathic meant, purely because I hadn't had any help. So what you have to do is research yourself, as you know. And so I was like, doesn't that just mean you don't know what causes it? So if you're saying that it's grass, wouldn't you be able to tell me ways that I could manage or, prevent this from happening? And he just lost it. He got so angry. He was like, I can't, you're trying to tell me what I, you're trying to put words in my mouth. And I was like, no, I'm trying to get clarification on what you're saying. I'm here for assistance. I don't expect an immediate diagnosis. I understand that this might take time, but you've just kind of contradicted the situation. And then he started to ask me what my job was and how old am I and did I grow up in the area? And it very much became this kind of like, how do I put her in a position or a place that makes sense in my mind to figure out my superiority to her? And that's not the first time that's happened. It wasn't the last time that happened. I went to see another doctor. He was just like, well, are you taking antihistamines? And I was like, yeah, I take antihistamine when it happens. It doesn't really do anything. I also have been taking them for quite a while in my life. As I mentioned before, I have hay fever, and he was like, well, how many are you taking? I was like, I'm taking one as per the box. And he literally laughed and was like, oh, that's stupid.
He said that's stupid.
He said that's stupid. And I was like, why? He's like, well, you need to be taking at least 4 every day. And I don't know if anyone else takes antihistamines, but they make you really fucking drowsy.
Yeah.
And long-term use of antihistamines is linked to some really, really gnarly diseases. That's not a long-term solution. And that's not the way that I expect to be spoken to by anyone, generally, especially not someone who I'm going to for help. And so I learned from an amazing, amazing person, Mars Lord, who's just, incredible, that all of our medical information is our own. And that's something that I didn't know before. And so you are allowed to record your doctor's appointments because that information is yours. You're not recording anything about a different patient or that doctor. That is yours. And so I just started to record every single consultation that I had, because I think when people engage with you like that, you're so taken aback and you kind of forget. You forget the questions you wanted to go in with. You forget the timeline of your things that have happened or the symptoms that you've had, and you don't really get as much out of it, especially in the short amount of time that you have. That was really quite a momentous learning for me. And then since then, if I could, I would book 2 GP appointments a couple of weeks apart, because I would have the foresight that I might get flustered and forget in that first one, record it, and then be able to go back in another time and have better questions and be better prepared to get the tests that I need to at least try and be further along in this diagnosis. So those are my tips and tricks.
Well, it's so important to know, because I think a lot of people don't feel like their medical information is their own. I know it's really difficult to even access your records in a way that feels accessible and easeful, both in the US and the UK, even though you're allowed to do it.
It's yours.
It's just an opaque process.
It also, what I feel like I witnessed in that meeting with that doctor, with that GP, was that he felt attacked by my knowledge, whereas it should be like you're coordinating communication with your patient to help them be more informed, and it should be a collaboration. It's not I'm a doctor, I know more than you, just sit there and listen to me. And it felt very much like I wasn't allowed to have any insight on what was going on in my body, and any sort of symptom that I was presenting to him and explaining in great detail. I spent a lot of time being like, let me go in with my journal, let me go in and explain timelines so that he's not in the dark. And it just felt like that was the wrong thing to do, and that really, really pissed him off. And safe to say, I've not been back to that GP. So yeah, I'm not surprised that it's difficult for us to obtain that information, and it's not common knowledge that for everyone to know that it belongs to them, because this is the kind of response a lot of people receive. Not everybody, but a lot of people I know have received this sort of very hostile, aggressive upset from GPs when they're an informed patient.
And it speaks to a lack of, like you say, collaboration between patient and doctor, and a lack of care really in training, because I think sometimes when you're a patient and you're seeking a diagnosis, there can feel like there's a lack of humanity in the room, and that it's very transactional. And unfortunately, it has become that.
Yeah, it has.
There's so little time given to how much you can even spend with your patient.
Yeah, you go in kind of prepping for an interview. You're like, okay, I'm going to give you as much information as I can. I'm going to sell you on the tragedy of this so that you take me seriously, and it's kind of hit and miss.
In terms of misogyny, it's rife, clearly. And you and I have talked at length outside of this context about racism within the medical establishment. How has being a Black woman changed or informed your approach to your own care?
I think I really weigh up whether it's worth going in, to be honest. Sometimes the after effects of being in a small room, with somebody kind of devaluing your symptoms and your lived experience cannot be worth it. Sometimes it's better for my health mentally and physically to stay at home and just do the gentle things, the softer things. The story I told before around, that doctor immediately going to, what's your job? What do you do? Where do you live? Are you from this area? I'm from Hackney, and that's where I was. And for me, that was a microaggression because it's irrelevant to the topic at hand. And it's come up as a kind of, I don't know how to explain. It came up as a kind of defense mechanism to try and really put us in our own lanes rather than being in that collaborative way. And I don't want to be in that position regularly. So I feel like the choice to weigh up whether or not I even go in for an appointment is the way that I can take care of myself as a Black woman facing an idiopathic illness. I, again, try and really equip myself with as much information. I try to lean on my community, other friends who also have had instances with diagnoses that aren't correct or lack of care when it comes to the medical industry. When I share things like that with my friends, I have a very diverse group of incredible girlfriends in my life. Hearing the different responses is also helpful for me as a Black woman to understand if I'm overreacting or if this is genuine. And some of my white girlfriends who have had similar other medical issues that I've had in terms of womb care, cysts on ovaries and things like that have had, or thyroid issues, have literally been like fast-tracked into blood work and tests to the point where, you know, they're trying to just make sure they understand what their diagnosis is. I've had exactly the same markers show up in my blood work, and it's been very much, we'll just wait and see what happens. So being able to understand that it's not just through my lens that this is happening, and hearing other people who I love and care about and they love and care about me has really helped me gain a better perspective on it. Having a nutritionist, I do now have a nutritionist that is incredible. She's amazing. I can't always afford to see her, but she has my file. And what that means is I have someone in my corner who, if something comes up that she's like, this needs to be taken care of, this needs to be checked, she will write a letter to my GP for me, preparing them for me coming into they have all the information. And I feel like that's like having someone in your corner. It's like having a security guard or a bodyguard being like, this person isn't just coming in to annoy you. This person isn't just coming in to like, I don't know, if you are going to assume that they're a hypochondriac. I am writing this letter, or I am equipping them with this information to ask for the right things because of these things. And you need to take that seriously. And I feel like for me, that feels like being held by a professional that I haven't experienced before. So I feel like those are the ways that I can kind of take care of myself outside of the things that are completely in my control, like resting and early night and putting my phone on airplane mode so before I go to bed. And as difficult as it is, trying to manage my stress levels, that is a constant work in progress. Like it's little things like that those are the things that I can control. Whereas the other things, it's like, how do I call in community to really assist in this journey?
And having people to advocate for you when you don't necessarily have the energy to do it for yourself, nor should you have to. And I think it's so empowering when we realize that we can have other people, we can outsource the advocacy, that because it can feel really lonely going and trying to figure something out as a patient.
It can, and daunting. Because like, what am I doing? Like, what even am I about to say? And you don't know what tests to ask for. Gosh, it's, the advocacy is truly like being held. It's like someone literally being in there holding your hand. I would like print off her emails and be like, she said I should ask for this, this, and this. It should always be available for a call afterwards. And I feel very grateful to have access to that at any point, whether it was like one consultation or 4. Like I said, it's not always available to me, but it has completely shifted my ability to go in with confidence.
So I want to shift and talk a little bit about grief. You mentioned it earlier. We deal in grief here at So Life Once You Dead. And the grief of having your body change sometimes overnight, and also having to say goodbye to parts of yourself through having an illness or a disability and through living with chronic illness. Have you felt the weight of that grief in having your body kind of shift over time and overnight?
I mean, yeah.
And also the lack of diagnosis.
Yeah, because you feel a bit crazy. Would you agree? Like, you feel a bit like, am I making this up? The grief of my body shifting has been and continues to be, again, a journey. the inflammation, like feeling inflamed all the time, completely changes the way that you're able to move through the world, the way you're able to get dressed, the way that things fit you, and not in a vain way, in a this is uncomfortable. Like, this is so uncomfortable. And so I grieve the ease of getting a massage and not knowing if I'm going to come up in hives, but not knowing why. And just simple things going away on holidays, and there's a high chance that I could have a flare-up, and there's something I can do to prevent it, because we don't know what it is or how it comes about. And so it's kind of always in the back of my mind to monitor my energy expenditure and not beat myself up about it if it does happen. But at the end of the day, obviously, it's really, really sad when you have to take a bed day. And so I think it's this preemptive grief as well, of like, am I going to miss this thing? Am I going to not be able to do that? Am I not going to want to go outside because my face is swollen and I can't open my eyes? You know, the vanity side is, are people going to think I've had botched fillers? Like, it's little things like that, which has happened. I once was working, and a friend was like, did you get fillers? And I was like, oh my God, no. That's not like, that's a bad thing. It's more like, I'm in pain and this is my body doing some really crazy shit. Wild. I did not pay for it. Absolutely not. Like, I would love for it to go down like ASAP. And so there's a kind of like a guard that you put up as well, like a defense mechanism. So yeah, I grieve my body being in peace and regulated, and this type of recurring inflammation is recurring trauma to your self body.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I love that term preemptive grief. I hadn't ever considered it in that way. And I have a similar thing where I sort of have to manage myself in a way that sometimes feels very constrictive because of the potentiality of not feeling well.
Yeah.
And there's always something at the back of my mind that's like, oh, if I do too much, will I make myself sick? And
constantly worried about that.
And there's no, for me at least, it's a very gray area, and there's no right way to do it, because you still have to be out in the world, or at least you don't have to, but I want to be.
I want to be out in the world too. I want to be on these streets.
Exactly. But it can feel really confronting to have to make decisions around it, because we don't live in a world that really caters to things like this.
Especially if it's invisible. It's not until I have a flare-up when someone's like, oh shit, this is what you mean, this is what you're talking about. And I'm sure it feels the same for you. It's like, if it's invisible, you have people who are gently sympathetic, but kind of a bit eye-rolly. And then you do push yourself a bit too far, and it's like, oh, okay, this is the thing that you've been concerned about this whole time. That's made you maybe a little bit less fun than other people at times.
Right. And there's not always, that care just is not built into our society, because we live in an ableist society.
Exactly.
So it's something we just have to self-manage at this stage. Hopefully we're building something new eventually, maybe not in a lifetime. As an illustrator and a fashion designer and a creative,
yes,
how do you use your art to unwind and de-stress? And how have you used art as an expressive way to channel your frustration about what you've gone through health-wise?
I've always kind of enjoyed creating things that maybe don't exist yet, or depicting things that aren't necessarily the visible reality. And that kind of just means gibberish and a mix of things. And so with my art, I just like to create whatever comes to mind. Like when I was in the state of trying to find a job that would pay me a decent amount when I graduated, I found myself drawing every day. And I was like, I wonder what it'd be like if there were fruits as planets in space. Like things like that. And as a visual piece, that's really gorgeous. And I really enjoyed that combination of worlds. And so that's kind of how my art evolves. And I feel can be transferred into multiple places. Like, you know, that could be someone wanting that to visually witness, like on a wall in their home, or something that someone might want to wear as textiles on their body, because it's just fun and it's not serious. In terms of like using my art to channel my experience through this illness, I don't think I have as much done that, but what I found is recently I found a way to merge my experience in the industry in fashion, revisit what it is that I truly love about that work and what I love about that industry and clothing and, you know, the beauty of that, and merging them together. And my work is now to advocate for, you know, a fairer fashion future. One of the things that I learned the most when I was working in luxury all those years ago was how crazy, wasteful, and again, harmful it is. Obviously, lived experience there. And so depicting imagery that really helps people visualize what goes on behind the scenes in the industry really felt like a calling that I wasn't awake to before. And I was able to work with some really amazing like organizations to help produce campaigns to really promote the amazing work that they're doing, supporting mostly women who are just forgotten about in the fashion industry. And I feel like because my gut is telling me that one of the main reasons I have this mystery illness is because of stress, and that industry was one of the first to cause me stress, that feels like a way of really channeling my experience of my art into a way of highlighting what other people are going through within it, and hopefully shifting that and ending that, and hoping that more people will start to learn and advocate for those people too. And I think the art aspect is a really powerful tool. The illustration aspect specifically is a really powerful tool, because you don't have to read a whole A4 page of information. You can just feel into the art.
So in terms of healing, you touched on it a bit, but for you right now, from where you've been in your search for a diagnosis to what you want it to look like eventually, what does healing look like for you?
It looks like lots of rest for lots of people. Mandatory, like non-negotiable. I did an immersion training with a really amazing teacher that you also know,
Yes.
Leila Sadeghi. And rest was a module in the training, and it wasn't negotiable, it was mandatory. And I found it really hard because we don't live in a world where that's encouraged, but it fucking changed the way that I went about my days. It completely shifted everything. And so I think if we could, I feel like a world where rest is encouraged and a topic that's always discussed, questioned, you know, have you rested today? Have you rested this week? Because that's how we maintain ourselves and our bodies and our health. And without it, we are all just running towards cycles of burnout, you know? And we should be trying to avoid that.
Absolutely.
You know?
More rest,
more art, more play.
So you may have the same answer for this one, but if you lived in a world that completely catered to your mystery illness, what would that look like?
Rest. To be honest, rest, but also it would be more expansive care. Like there aren't many even like ointments or products that are cooling for the body when you have inflammation. And I feel like a lot of people have inflammation. Like more of an investment in what it means to expand what care looks like, whether that would be more herbalism, what herbs local to you that you can ingest that are incredibly good at reducing inflammation. Have those in your home. You know about them. Are they in ointments? Are they in creams? Like, what does that mean? How do we have a full, like a circular version of like treatment that's not just okay, shit, I need to lay down now, and that's all I can do. So yeah, rest, and then just like a plethora of like herbal remedies that really do just shift things from the inside out. That would really cater to a lot of people who have inflammation and don't know why.
I mean, for me, living in a world where something like the NHS collaborates with people who work with herbs, that would be a utopia.
That's exactly what my brain was trying to say. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the NHS, I have massive respect for the NHS. And I was in the US when I got sick, but for those doctors who helped me, but there's so much that falls short in terms of care, like you say.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I love the NHS too. They're amazing. And there's so many other things that I've, been able and blessed to be able to lean on them for. This is not a representative of it as a whole, but there is definitely a gap when it comes to things that are difficult to pinpoint to one thing, and there isn't enough support for them at all. So what's one thing that you do each day to keep yourself creative? Truly, I dance every day, inspired by my friend Nora. I love that. But yeah, it really helps. I find whenever I've done any sort of movement practice or meditation practice, that's when my ideas flow. And if I have fallen off that wagon and I lose ideas, I know exactly how to get them back. So yeah, dancing, lots of Robin, Florence and the Machine. Love it. Bit of K-Dot. What's amazing is that you're not the only person who said that. It's like medicine. Yeah, it's definitely medicine. We love dancing. And then finally, what's one phrase or saying that you always come back to? Okay, so it'll probably be like, fuck this shit. Love it. Fuck this shit. Fuck this shit. That's a good life motto. I'm into it. Maybe that'll be the tagline for the show. Fuck this shit. Well, thank you so much for being here, Ronaé. How can people engage with your work? Where can they find you? Instagram, it's Ronaé S. Fagon. That's my handle. There'll be a lot of plants and my artwork, probably some yelling at fashion CEOs, mostly that actually. But yeah, it's at Ronaé S. Fagon. Thank you for being here today. Thanks. So grateful to have you. Pleasure. That was our show, So Life Wants You Dead. Thanks so much for being here. This episode was made in collaboration with and support from Soho House. Many thanks to Jamila Brown, Min Shrimpton, Olivia Garrity, Sagal Mohammed, Erica Bonet, and Teo Vanderbroeke. Our illustrations are by our guest today, Ronaé Fagon. And if you like us, if you like the show, please subscribe. Leave us a review or rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you love us or even just like us a little, rating us and subscribing makes a big difference. You can find us on Instagram at So Life Wants You Dead, where we talk about everything that's happening here in real time. Thanks so much and see you next time.